Picture this. You're out on the ice. It's a perfect, cold, still morning. Not a sound for miles except the wind. You've drilled your holes, set your lines, and now you're sitting perfectly still. You don't dare even shuffle your feet. We've all been taught this is the key to success, right? Be quiet, don't spook the fish. But what if I told you that this sacred rule, this advice passed down from our grandfathers, is the very reason your flasher is blank and your bucket is empty? What if the fish below your feet aren't scared of noise, but are terrified of your perfect, absolute silence? In this video, we're going to tear down one of the oldest beliefs in ice fishing and show you why making a little life under the ice could be the secret to your best winter ever. So let me ask you, do you think I'm crazy, or have you ever had a gut feeling that something about being dead quiet just felt wrong? For generations, the #1 rule of ice fishing has been drilled into our heads: be quiet. You drop a thermos, and the old timer 100 yards away gives you a death stare. You shuffle your feet in the shanty, and your buddy tells you to knock it off. The logic seems sound, and it comes from a place of respect for the environment. We know sound travels incredibly well through water and ice. We know fish have a lateral line, a remarkable sensory organ that picks up the slightest vibrations. So the natural conclusion is that any noise we make is like setting off an alarm bell underwater, sending every perch and walleye for miles into a state of panic. This belief has shaped everything we do, from creeping around on the ice to developing silent gear. We've become obsessed with creating a cone of silence around our fishing spot, believing it's the ultimate form of stealth. But this entire philosophy is built on one massive, flawed assumption that the world under the ice is silent to begin with. First, let's shatter the myth of the silent world. We sit on the ice and perceive a profound quiet, but that's a human perception filtered through air and our limited senses. Under that seemingly peaceful sheet of ice is a world that's constantly humming with subtle energy. Think about the immense pressure of the ice itself. As temperatures fluctuate, it groans, cracks, and pops. Those deep, powerful vibrations are not small sounds. They are massive pressure waves that travel for miles through the water. It's the bass track in the background music of the fish's world. This isn't a disturbance to them, it's the norm. It's a constant reminder of the physical reality of their environment. For a fish, this constant, low-level symphony of vibration is completely normal. They've evolved over millions of years to not just live with it, but to interpret it. We think we're being stealthy by staying quiet, but in reality we're trying to impose an alien-like silence on a world that is never truly quiet. Our silence is the thing that doesn't belong. So if it's not silent, what's the underwater reality really like? Beyond the shifting ice, there's a whole ecosystem of sound. You have currents, however slight they may be in a lake, that are constantly moving water, brushing against weeds and shifting sediment on the bottom. Each of those actions creates a subtle vibration, a unique signature. Then you have the life itself. A school of shiners flickering their tails as they move creates a distinct pressure wave. Crayfish and other invertebrates scuttling across the rocks or digging in the mud are sending out little signals. Even the slow decay of organic matter can release gases that bubble to the surface. It is a complex, layered soundscape. For a fish, this isn't noise, it's information. It's how they know where the current is, where a food source might be, or where other fish are. This constant hum of activity is the sound of a healthy living environment. It's the sound of home. And when that sound suddenly disappears, it's a major red flag. Let's talk more about that lateral line. We've been taught to think of it only as a danger sensor, an early warning system for predators. And while it certainly serves that purpose, that's only half the story. The lateral line is how a fish sees with the sides of its body. It's how a northern pike can strike with pinpoint accuracy in murky water, and how a walleye can hunt in near-total darkness. It picks up the pressure waves and vibrations made by everything around it and creates a three-dimensional map of its world. It can distinguish between the vibration of a water bug struggling on the surface and the vibration of a swimming minnow below. It's not just a simple alarm, it's an incredibly sophisticated information-gathering tool. So when we present a bait with absolutely no vibration, sitting perfectly still in a dead silent environment, we are essentially invisible to this primary sense. We're a blank spot on the map, and in nature, blank spots are often treated with suspicion. This brings us to the crucial idea of the sound of life. For any predator, the sounds of potential prey are a dinner bell. A perch doesn't just rely on its eyes to find food, it feels the frantic vibrations of a struggling freshwater shrimp. A walleye hones in on the unmistakable pulse of a small, distressed fish. These sounds signal opportunity, energy, and a meal. This is the language of the lake. When your jig is rhythmically tapping the bottom, it's not just a random noise. You are speaking this language. You're imitating a crayfish digging or a minnow feeding on the bottom. You are creating a vibration that says food is here. A lure with a rattle, a spoon that flutters erratically, a jigging motion that creates a consistent thump, thump, thump. These are all ways of signaling life and activity. Absolute silence, on the other hand, signals the opposite. It signals a dead zone, an area devoid of the very life that the fish are actively seeking out for their next meal. Now let's flip that coin and consider the sound of death, or more accurately, the sound of danger. What does absolute silence mean in the natural world, above or below the water? Think about walking through a forest. If the birds are chirping and the squirrels are chattering, everything is normal. But if all that noise suddenly stops, what's your first instinct? You freeze, you look around, you know a predator, like a hawk or a coyote, is nearby. That sudden absence of sound is a universal warning sign. It's no different under the ice. When a big pike glides into a weed bed, the bait fish don't start screaming, they freeze, they go silent. That sudden quiet is the signal that a hunter is actively stalking. So when we create an area of profound, unnatural silence around our bait, we might not be signaling safety to the fish. We might actually be mimicking the exact sensory conditions of a predator on the hunt, causing every fish in the vicinity to lock down and become incredibly cautious. I can tell you the exact moment this whole idea started to click for me. I was out on a notoriously tough lake, fishing for perch. I'd been sitting over a hole for 2 hours, nothing, not a single mark on the flasher. The lake was dead silent like a tomb. I was getting frustrated. Then in the distance, a group of guys on snowmobiles fired up and ripped across the other side of the lake. My first thought was, well, that's it for the day, they just spooked everything for miles. But not 30 seconds later, my rod tip bobbed, then slammed down. It was a jumbo perch, a total fluke? Maybe, but it got me thinking. The loudest, most obnoxious noise of the day happened, and the immediate result was a bite. It broke that eerie, unnatural silence and seemed to almost wake the fish up. Or perhaps it made my small jig, which was now the only life sign in the area, a sudden and irresistible target. That experience led me to start a simple, deliberate experiment. I called it the noisy hole test. I'd drill 2 holes about 40 or 50 feet apart over similar structure. Over the first hole, I would practice the old-school method, complete silence. I'd set up my shelter, drop my lure, and then sit like a statue, minimizing every single movement. Over the second hole, I did the opposite. I'd intentionally create small, rhythmic sounds. I would tap the butt of my rod against my boot every 10 seconds. I would jig more aggressively, making sure my lure was constantly pounding the bottom, kicking up puffs of silt. I wasn't being obnoxious, I wasn't dropping wrenches or stomping around, but I was making sure to create a consistent, audible, and tactile presence in the water. I was no longer trying to be a ghost, I was trying to sound like a part of the living ecosystem. The results of comparing these two holes time and time again were genuinely shocking. More often than not, the noisy hole would outfish the silent hole by a margin of 3 or 4 to 1. It wasn't even close. I'd see marks show up on the flasher on the noisy side, fish that seemed to be actively investigating the source of the vibration. They would come in hot and often strike aggressively. Meanwhile, the silent hole would remain barren. If a fish did wander by, it often seemed hesitant, unwilling to commit. This wasn't a one-time fluke, it was a repeatable pattern across different lakes and for different species, from perch to walleye to crappie. The evidence became too consistent to ignore. The controlled, rhythmic noise wasn't scaring fish away, it was drawing them in. It was acting as a beacon, an advertisement that something was happening here, something worth checking out. This is the most important part of the whole theory. We have to understand the difference between good noise and bad noise. This isn't a free pass to have a party on the ice. Bad noise is sharp, sudden, and unnatural. Dropping a heavy metal tackle box on the ice creates a high-frequency, sharp crack that is unlike anything in nature. It's an alarm bell. Aggressively stomping your feet sends jarring, erratic shock waves. That's a panic signal. Good noise, on the other hand, is rhythmic and organic. It's the consistent thump, thump, thump of a heavy tungsten jig on a soft bottom. It's the subtle click, click, click of a rattle inside a lipless crankbait. It's the low-frequency vibration you create by rhythmically tapping your rod or even just consistently jigging. Good noise mimics life. Bad noise signals danger. Our goal isn't to be loud. Our goal is to sound alive and natural. Think about the ultimate paradox in ice fishing noise, the auger. It is, without a doubt, the loudest, most violent and most disruptive sound we will ever make. According to the old rules, drilling a hole should send every fish within a square mile fleeing for the deepest water. Yet, how many times have you had a fish slam your lure within the first minute of it hitting the water in a brand new hole? It happens all the time. Why? Because the auger creates total chaos. It chews up the ice, sends a massive shockwave, and churns up the water, kicking up sediment, nutrients, and tiny organisms from the bottom. In that moment of chaos, a fish's defenses are overwhelmed, but it also signals a major event. It can mimic a large school of fish attacking bait or a major disturbance that unearths food. The auger breaks the sterile silence and creates a sudden, temporary feeding opportunity. The boldest fish move in to investigate the commotion, and your lure is the first thing they see. So how can we intentionally create these good noises and mimic prey sounds? The tackle industry has been onto this for years, even if we haven't always understood why it works. The most obvious tool is a lure with a rattle. Those tiny beads inside a plastic or metal chamber create a high-frequency clicking sound that is incredibly effective at calling fish in from a distance, especially in stained water. Another way is to use heavier jigs than you think you need. A heavy tungsten jig allows you to pound the bottom with authority. You're not just tapping, you're creating a distinct thud that kicks up a puff of mud or sand. This is both a visual and a vibrational trigger. It imitates a crayfish or other bottom dweller digging for food, a prime signal for a hungry perch. The key is to make your lure sound like it's interacting with its environment, not just hanging there silently in the void. Let's focus on the rhythm of the jig. Your jigging motion is far more than just a way to impart action on the lure. It's the heartbeat of your presentation. Every time you lift and drop your rod, you're sending a pulse down the line. A steady, consistent pulse is a powerful attractant. It creates a predictable pressure wave in the water that fish can lock onto with their lateral line. Think of it like a drumbeat they can follow back to its source. An erratic, spastic jigging motion can sometimes trigger a reaction strike, but a consistent, rhythmic cadence is what often draws them in from a distance. It's a sign of persistent, predictable life. It sounds less like a creature in its death throes and more like a creature confidently going about its business. And that confidence can be just the thing to convince a wary walleye that your lure is a safe and easy meal. Now consider the classic dead stick rig, which seems to contradict this whole idea. You set it up and you don't touch it. It's the definition of a silent approach. But why does a dead stick with a live minnow so often outfish a dead stick with a stationary jig? The answer is simple. The minnow is never truly silent or still. A lively shiner or fathead is constantly moving. It's struggling against the hook, flickering its tail, and sending out a continuous stream of subtle, desperate vibrations. It is a living, breathing, pulsing beacon of distress. It is the ultimate good noise. It's a perfect, natural signal that says easy meal right here. A plain hook with a dead minnow or just a plastic bait sitting motionless sends out no such signal. It is silent and dead. The success of the live bait dead stick isn't a victory for the silent approach. It's the ultimate proof that a constant signal of life is what truly triggers fish to bite. If you still doubt how sensitive fish are to vibration, let's talk about pressure changes. We all know that fishing can be incredible before a storm front moves in. The barometric pressure drops and the fish go on a feeding frenzy. What is barometric pressure? It's the weight of the air pressing down on the water. It is, in essence, a massive, slow-moving, low-frequency vibration that affects the entire lake. Fish are exquisitely tuned to these changes. It affects their swim bladders and their comfort levels, and it signals a change in weather that often triggers an instinct to feed. This proves, beyond any doubt, that fish are not living in a quiet, isolated world. They are constantly reacting to massive, invisible forces and vibrations. Our tiny little jig thumping the bottom is nothing compared to a 1 millibar drop in pressure, yet we worry that our little noise is too much. It's a matter of scale and understanding what they're truly tuned into. Let's look at the group fishing effect. Sometimes you'll see a small village of ice shanties clustered in one area, and that spot will be on fire. The common thinking is that they must have found a magical secret spot on the map. And sometimes that's true, but there might be another factor at play. Think about the cumulative effect of all that activity. You have 10, 15, maybe 20 anglers in one area. They're drilling holes, checking lines, jigging, and just moving around. All that low-level collective activity creates a constant, wide area zone of life. It's not loud and jarring, but it's a persistent hum of vibration. This can act as a huge attractor, pulling in curious and active fish from the surrounding quieter areas of the lake. They sense a hub of activity and come to investigate. Your lone, silent setup a half-mile away might be in a dead zone by comparison. Sometimes being part of the noise is better than being isolated in the quiet. Of course, I have to address the big counter-argument. But what about spooking them? This is a valid concern, and I am not telling you that noise can't spook fish. It absolutely can, but we have to be specific. A sudden, high-frequency sound like scraping a metal shovel on the ice right above a fish's head will almost certainly send it running. An unexpected, jarring stomp will do the same. Why? Because these sounds are sharp, unpredictable, and have no natural equivalent. They are clear signals of a large, clumsy, and potentially dangerous presence. The fish's brain, hardwired for survival, categorizes this as a threat, but the rhythmic, low-frequency thump of a jig or the clicking of a rattle falls into a different category. It's predictable, it's smaller. It sounds more like food than a foe. The entire key is understanding the difference between a dinner bell and a fire alarm. To really get this, you have to try to think like a predator, specifically the fish you're targeting. Let's say you're a big perch. You spend your day cruising the bottom, using your eyes, but heavily relying on your lateral line to detect your next meal. What are you listening for? You're listening for the signature vibrations of your food. You're feeling for the scuttling of a crayfish, the nervous flicker of a minnow, or the telltale thump of a mayfly nymph digging in the mud. These are all positive signals that you are trained to move toward. Now, you detect a new vibration. It's rhythmic. Thump, thump, thump. It's consistent. It sounds like something is alive and active on the bottom. Is your first reaction to flee in terror? No. Your first reaction is curiosity and hunger. You move toward the sound to investigate. Your lure's job is to sound like a potential meal, not to hide in silence and hope the fish just stumbles upon it. Consider this from an ecological perspective, the silence of a stressed environment. What are the quietest places in a lake during the winter? They are often the deep, featureless basins with low oxygen levels, the areas with very little food, very little current, and very little life. These zones are naturally silent because nothing is happening there. Fish, driven by instinct, understand this. They associate a lack of sensory input, a profound silence, with a bad place to be. It's an unproductive, potentially dangerous area. So when you create your own little bubble of unnatural silence in an otherwise productive area, you could be inadvertently signaling that your location is a dead zone. You are creating the acoustic signature of a place to be avoided rather than the bustling acoustic signature of a place teeming with feeding opportunities. The fish might just be avoiding your dead zone on their way to a noisier, more promising spot. So, I'm issuing you a challenge. Here is a practical experiment you can try on your very next trip. It's simple. Set up 2 lines as the law allows on your first rod. Do everything the old school way. Be a ghost. Use a small, subtle bait, and keep your movements to an absolute minimum. Let it be your control group. On your second rod, I want you to be the agent of life. Use a lure with a rattle, or a heavier spoon or jig. Pound the bottom. Jig consistently. Tap your rod butt. Don't be obnoxious, but be present. Be active. Create a consistent, rhythmic vibration. Then just fish. Pay attention to which rod gets more looks on the flasher. Pay attention to which rod gets more bites. I'm willing to bet that after a few hours, the results will speak for themselves. You have nothing to lose, and you might just gain a whole new perspective on how to approach the hard water. Ultimately, this all comes down to redefining what stealth on the ice really means. For too long, we've equated stealth with total silence, with trying to become invisible and erase our presence. But true stealth in nature isn't about being a ghost. It's about blending in. It's about mimicry. A masterful hunter doesn't move in dead silence. They move with the rhythm of the environment. For us on the ice, that means our stealth comes from imitating the natural, vibrant, and noisy rhythm of the underwater world. It's about transforming ourselves from a silent, suspicious void into just another part of the lake's living symphony. When your presentation sounds like it belongs there, when it sounds like food, the fish won't be spooked by it. They will be drawn to it. Stop hiding from the fish. It's time to start calling them in. So, let's bring it all together. For years, we've tiptoed around on the ice, shushing each other, terrified of making a sound. We've been operating under the belief that silence is golden. But the big twist, the real aha moment, is that in the underwater world, silence isn't golden. It's a warning sign. The most terrifying thing for a fish isn't the sound of your activity. It's the sudden, unnatural absence of it. They live in a world of constant vibration, and they use that noise to find food and navigate their surroundings. By being active, by creating rhythmic, lifelike sounds, we're not scaring them off. We're speaking their language. We're putting up a giant vibrating billboard that says, "Food is over here." This one shift in thinking can fundamentally change your entire approach to ice fishing, turning frustratingly slow days into active, aggressive bites. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge the old rules with me. If this gave you something to think about, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. And now I want to ask you, what's the one old-timer rule that you've broken on purpose or by accident that led to you catching more fish? Drop that story in the comments below. I'd love to read it.